we were talking about how Borderlands terrible,
Oh yeah,
terrible attempt.
did video game movies turn it around? Um, so I remember a few years ago, I was watching this. It was a video. I can't remember what it was or who produced it. Um, but it did actually address this subject, and what they were talking about was superhero movies. Okay, and how long it took them to actually be consistently good, like they are now.
Mm.
Um, now the idea of it was that you had, adaptations like Superman and Batman that were, of course, fantastic. But then you had a bunch of stuff like Dick Tracy, Steel, or The Phantom or whatever, which were terrible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason,
Electra,
well, that's a few years later, but
still terrible.
what I'm
Catwoman, terrible.
well, that's a little bit later. We're getting to that. We're getting to that. But what this person postulates is that they had to wait. Um, okay, so you have I'm going to ramble a little bit. You have somebody like Peter Jackson. Okay, he grows up reading the Lord of the Rings. Okay,
Okay.
it hits him at a fundament. It hits him at a formative age. He goes on to make the adaptation that probably would not have been doable for somebody who was like in their 40s already, who just read the book when it just came out. So that's what ends up happening with a lot of superhero movies, where you have the early 2000s, Blade, Spider-Man, X-Men, and then later adaptations made later, actually made by people who were fans of this stuff and who grew up with it. And they
Okay.
postulate that that is the reason why these movies were actually good, because Sam Raimi probably grew up reading the original Stan Lee, Steve Ditko books from the 60s.
Right. Versus people who were just hired to capitalize on something that was
Hmm.
starting to boom at that time.
Yeah.
Uh, right.
So now I feel like we're somewhat starting to see something with movies, with video game adaptations.
Yes, that's a very good point. Actually, it makes total sense because video games didn't really become a thing until the 80s, and they didn't really become highly prevalent until the 2000s.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So now we're having, now we're starting to see, filmmakers or whoever who, have more respect for the medium and are actually, able to do proper adaptations of them. Um,
Right, right,
Whereas
right.
before the best that we could get was probably the Mortal Kombat movie. I would say the first one. Um,
And
and then
again, that came out around a time where it was booming, and you're just trying to cash in,
yeah,
and the
yeah,
director probably doesn't even know what the fuck a Nintendo really is.
it's the
You
same
know,
guy who made the Resident Evil movies, the first few. So
Eh,
I don't know. I don't know.
that guy made a fucking living off
Hmm.
of cult classics that somehow developed a cult despite butchering the source material. I don't know.
Hmm.
And
I don't.
only and literally he had like two or three franchises doing the same exact thing and somehow turned it into 20 films. I don't.
I don't get it either, man. I mean, they kept earning money, so I guess they kept making them. I mean, it kept them employed. It kept a roof over their heads. I can't complain too much if that's the case, because everything I've been told about that industry is that it's very unstable these days. So whatever. Good for them.
But honestly, if it wasn't for that, I don't think people would have found a gripe with it enough to resolve it.
That's fair. That's fair. Um, but if we're going into like today's like stuff, okay. Uh, let's talk about some of the good ones that we've seen. Okay. Did you see the Super Mario Brothers movie?
Yes, loved it. 10 out of 10. 10 out of
Sorry,
10.
excuse me. Okay, for me, the way that I would kind of begin and end any kind of review of it is with a single sentence. My nephew really enjoyed it. And you can make of that what you will.
So, what I had said about that movie is that. Sorry, got some dust in my mouth.
You're good. You're good.
As
You're
I
good.
mentioned earlier, but now I have to explain to them, is that it's been a couple months since I've been working overtime and I have not been in here. So everything's really dusty right now. I plan on fixing it tomorrow, but I'm getting dust balls in my fucking mouth. So anyway, my take on Super Mario Bros. Because a lot of people were like, "Oh, you know, blaming it. It's only for the kids. It's fine." Look, if I can go to a
It's
movie,
fucking Mario, man. What do you
that's what I'm
expect?
saying. It's made for kids, but then they're like, "Oh, but what about us who made it and we've been waiting?" And it's like, I'm like, okay, if I can go to a movie and my kids enjoy it and laugh and understand it for their reasons, and I separately can enjoy it and laugh and for my reasons, and both of us can take our own enjoyment out of it, that's a win for me.
Mhm.
I mean that like because I'll go to a movie and I'll enjoy it, but my kids will irritate the fuck out of me, and I'll wish I didn't take them because they're not clicking the same way I am, or vice versa. They'll love it, but I'll fall asleep to it. Like Haunted Mansion, they loved. I fell asleep. Right? I loved Spider Verse. They were not into it. You know, so for Super Mario being a movie that everybody was locked into, of all ages,
Mhm.
of all genders, how can you not call that a win?
It kind
Even
of
if it
feels.
wasn't perfect from my view, the fact that it was so well rounded,
Mhm.
that's a
I
10.
would I would agree with that. Um, what I seen, what I seen to like, I know like the like that Rotten Tomatoes movie I think had it like 50% or whatever. Um, there's one movie critic that I do follow, and he points out that it's likely that like a lot of people were a bit more harsher on this than maybe they needed to have been, is because their standards for animation might be a little bit too high at this point. Because if you remember 10 years ago, for example, you had the fucking Lego movie. It's like one of the best fucking animated movies that were ever made, right?
Okay.
But like now, unfortunately, everyone seems to think that everything needs to be the Lego movie, where it's like low key subversive and really made for adults. And like, no, it doesn't need to be
No,
that.
because the
So
problem is that no adults don't go fucking pay to see animated movies. If they did, case in point, Transformers 1, highest rated, lowest viewed.
yeah, I
Lowest
don't think
box office Transformers, but it's the highest rated. Why? Because just like always, studios will grant a low budget animation for scripts that they don't believe will sell. Even
it.
though those
Mm,
scripts are great, but because it's against their outdated standards, they won't give it a live action. And then what happens? Nobody goes to pay to see it. Nobody pays to see animation in the fucking box office, and they're right, even though they're not. But because you guys didn't
yeah,
pay to go see animation, they look right. So
I'm not
you're
really
not gonna. I
sure.
mean, you can't have these high expectations for animation and then don't go pay to see animation.
I'm not entirely sure I agree with all of that, but yeah, Transformers One bombed.
I know it's a bit of
It's
conspiracy on the
sad.
studio side, but I'll bet my money on it. But point being is animation. I mean, get real. It's made for kids. I'm glad if you can
Primarily,
enjoy it
yeah.
as an adult. Awesome, but you got to be realistic. You can't expect studios to not target kids.
Mhm. Um, so the last time my nephew was up here was like a couple of weeks ago. My mom and I were talking about taking him to see a movie. And guess what he wants to see?
Hold on, because I don't even know what's out right now.
Well, this is like a month or so, more
Month or
like
so.
two, like month or two ago. Still sort of like in the summerish season.
Okay.
Just take a guess. Just take a guess.
Hold on. Hold on. Hold on, because I want now you're challenging me. Hold on.
Okay.
Movies 2024 summer. Let me just get some ideas. We got Deadpool, Wolverine.
Okay.
What's it? Borderland? No, it wasn't Borderlands, dog. Oh man, it was Borderlands.
No, it was not
Okay,
Borderlands.
hold on then. Hold on. Your nephew, how old is he?
He just turned 8, I think.
Oh, is it Despicable Me?
That's what my mom wanted to see with him. So I was talking about seeing Transformers 1. Okay, because I
Okay,
kind of wanted to see that. My mom wanted to see Despicable Me. And then I'm just thinking to myself, okay, wait, he's getting older. He knows what he wants to see at this point, right? So I just
okay,
look at him and I just say, Wyatt, what do you want to see in theaters? And he says without hesitation, Deadpool and Wolverine.
okay. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I couldn't quite believe that one. But he wanted to see it because he'd seen a lot of the clips online. Apparently, I don't know how he saw them. I don't know why he saw them. Not my business. But that's the movie he wanted to see. So, what do kids want to see? I don't know anymore. I'm getting
I-
old. You were not
yeah.
expecting me to say that. You're a little
No,
speechless over there.
I was like thinking, well, animated or kid or
Nope, nope.
uh,
He wanted to see the not very subtle gay romance superhero movie. Uh,
oh, yo, you know what was good as far as
what?
animated movies go like that? Which
What's
again,
up?
targeted towards kids, but I highly enjoyed it. Was the Garfield movie?
I never saw that one.
Oh, that was good.
So it's just I have no feelings about that one way or the other.
Man, I kind of had the same like I had no feelings about it going into the movie. I was like, we're just taking the kids, whatever. I'll probably go to sleep. But honestly, it was really good.
So getting back on track.
Yes, yes.
Super Mario Brothers comes in. It's the highest grossing movie that year, I think. I think Barbie rivaled it, but I think in the end it was Mario Brothers. I'd have to look it up. It's definitely in the
Yeah.
top three. Um, so that's definitely something that proves, okay, video game adaptations can make money and they can be good, despite people's weird expectations about that.
Have you seen
Television is.
Sonic?
Oh yeah, I forgot about to talk about Sonic. I have seen both Sonic movies. Um, um, I enjoyed them more than I was expecting.
Same.
But they still definitely feel like those two movies kind of fell more into this sort of middling, okay category,
Hmm.
which previous adaptations had been in. But then again, what can you really do with Sonic?
Right.
Yeah.
And the first one you could tell was kind of in. It really was in that old,
Hmm.
that category because we had to force them to change Sonic. Uh,
Yeah, that and also it falls very into this neat category of a movie that involves a video game character, a B-list but still somewhat recognizable celebrity as the main human character,
hmm
and a
hmm
fucking road trip.
Yeah.
And a fucking road trip.
But I feel like the fact that it was such a cliche type, uh, like you said, it exceeded expectations enough to where the
Mhm,
second and third one they just keep getting. Well, obviously we haven't seen three yet, but I feel like
mhm,
it just continues to get better
mhm.
and better and more. Um, how would you say it? Like you were saying, dedicated to the craft or the
Yeah,
source.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just now we're getting Sonic the Hedgehog, which feels vaguely apocalyptic, but whatever. um, okay, so let's shift over into television, and there's like three big ones that are on my mind. Okay,
Mhm.
Um, Now, Twisted Metal. Did you see that one?
I did not.
Okay.
I heard good things.
So, Twisted Metal, the first season anyway, is technically speaking not a particularly faithful adaptation because the whole season is basically here we go again. It's a road trip movie. Um, the main character, played by Anthony Mackie, is just going to, I think, Chicago to make a delivery or pick up a delivery and then head back. And the whole show is basically introducing all these characters. It's basically kind of it's more of a Mad Max kind of movie, if we're being honest with you. If we're being honest about it.
Okay.
So it's like apocalyptic world. Um, it works though. It's a lot of fun. It's funny as hell. The action's a little bit limited, but it's still good. Okay. Um, but it's not a great. It's not. It doesn't seem like it's a good Twisted Metal sort of thing because there's never a tournament. Calypso only pops up once. But it's still solid, if that makes sense. It kind of takes the original concept, sort of throws it out the window until the final episode, where they basically say there's going to be a tournament that's happening. It's being run by Calypso, and all these other characters who've been introduced throughout the series are going to be part of it. And now we get to look forward to that in Twisted Metal season 2. But personally, I think this show was really solid, and it also had a lot to do with, maybe a bit more subtly, but helping to break that stigma that video game adaptations can't be good. Okay.
Mm.
So do recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Most of the episodes are only half an hour long, so it's not a big time sink. Um, but then,
I don't know how to feel about that. I'm not big
yeah,
into half-hour shows.
well, you gotta keep in mind this show is almost more of a comedy than it is, an action show, if
That's
that
my
makes
point.
sense. So,
That's
okay, okay,
that's
okay.
usually what you get is more network sitcom from 30
Um,
minute.
well, let me put it this way. They somehow, two of the characters, like midway through the series, end up getting captured and they get waterboarded. Okay. Somehow they make that hilarious. I don't know how, but they do it.
And like if it was an actual sitcom, I'd be good with that. But like when they take story, more story derived shows,
Hmm.
which this you're kind of painting the picture of to me, and
Hmm.
only make them 30 minutes, I feel like it just loses investment.
It's fair.
It's at least for me,
Um,
I don't really quite know how to feel about 30-minute episodes
okay.
with that substance.
I would say give the first couple episodes a shot and go from there. So
I might.
then we have one of the then we have one of the bigger ones. Okay. The Last of Us.
Mm.
I am so sick of hearing people talk about The Last of Us. Oh my god, I have been sick of hearing people talk about The Last of Us for 10 years, to be honest with you. Um,
You're not a Last of Us fan, huh?
so let's talk about the show. We're not going to talk
What
about.
about the game?
We'll talk about the game in a little bit. Okay, so the show, probably more than any other thing that's existed, probably has completely shattered the stigma of video game adaptations inherently being bad.
Mhm.
Okay, did you see the Last of Us show?
Oh yeah, I loved it. 10 out of 10.
Well, well, very well acted, very well shot, very well directed, brilliantly written, all
Hmm.
that good stuff. You're waiting for the punchline. I
Yes.
the problem is that it's just an adaptation of already a very cinematic game. A very cinematic game that I did not care for all that much because it was very overhyped. It felt very overhyped when it first came out. Um,
I
my
will
issue with
say that I feel like it was so hyped because it felt like a movie that played well. It was limited because of that. You know, it wasn't
Mhm,
entirely gameplay immersive.
mhm.
Uh, but at that time, I don't think you had any game that did uh cinematography as good as Last of Us.
I don't remember well enough to really comment on that. It's been a very
Because
long time
there
since I
was
thought about that.
games that had highly cinema
Mhm,
focused stories
mhm.
like
Heavy
Beyond
Rain.
Two Souls, great story, but that wasn't really a game. It was more of a movie. It didn't
It's
have
an
no
interactive
gameplay.
movie, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, my issue with The Last of Us kind of goes like this. Um, by that point, I actually was starting to feel the zombie fatigue hard.
Mm,
And a lot of the plot points in that game, I just remember thinking to myself, this is literally just the same stuff we'd seen in the Telltale Walking Dead game a year
hmm
earlier.
hmm
Yeah. So so just to see
But
that
again,
basically okay.
great story. Not really a game.
I don't disagree with that, but then just to see that again on on HBO Max or whatever, it was just okay, fine, but again, I'll acknowledge that just from a sheer quote unquote objective standpoint, very well made. I don't have a gripe with it or anybody who enjoyed it. It's
But
just
like you said, being that that game was mostly focused on its cinema aspect
mhm.
than anything. I mean, how you can't fuck that up. You can't
It's
mess that
also yeah,
adaptation up.
it is significantly easier to adapt, I would say. It also definitely helped that the person who was in charge of it, or one of the people in charge of it was, of course, the guy who, helped make the
Hmm
game. And you actually had a really good showrunner in that in the form of the guy who did Chernobyl, so which already kind of was a Last of Us show as was, but um, God,
Pretty much.
oh, that show's a nightmare.
Okay, now there's two games on my mind left, and you said you had one. So
Okay,
which one are you
so
talking about?
so for me, an actual better example of what we're talking about of an adaptation that is very respectful to its source material, that like The Last of Us, but all had a lot more hurdles to overcome, is the Fallout show.
Hmm
Yeah, yeah,
hmm I
um,
loved it.
yeah. That to me, oh god. Okay, so let me gush for a second. I loved everything about that show. I loved the characters. I loved, how miserable the wastelands were. I loved the plot twists. There's even this 2-episode arc in the middle of the show that doesn't really go anywhere, where they end up in another vault for a while. It
hmm
doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't really contribute anything to the plot, if we're being honest with you, but it's so fucking entertaining and fun and subversive that I didn't
Yeah.
fucking care. It was
Yeah, it
great.
did. It has no effect on the overall art. So you could probably skip the whole thing, but it was just so in
Mhm,
itself was so good and just
mhm,
so it just touched so many points of the
mhm.
game and
Yeah.
what we love about the game. Like, okay,
Mhm,
we're gonna take a sidetrack into this vault and
mhm,
lose ourselves in this vault's individual story for about three
mhm.
days, and then we'll come
Yeah.
back and realize, wait a minute, we were supposed to go over here and do this type of thing. So it really did in so many ways, not only just like including, like you said, including things like
Mhm,
caps and
mhm,
wonky weapons and wonky animals, but just the entire idea of gameplay,
mhm,
going into this vault, losing yourself and coming back,
mhm.
and then getting back on course.
I especially
That's the
loved
Fallout
the
game.
I especially loved the twist where it was like, "No, there's nothing weird going on here. They're just, they're actually it turns out they're nice people, and it was just all a big misunderstanding." It just and then just like they're going up the elevator, um, the paladin guy is just like standing there awkwardly in the power armor, is like, oops. And like the
We
girl
just
is just
made it
like,
worse and destroyed
yeah,
their whole colony.
yeah, and like has her hands on her hips looking away, like, are you I can't believe this fucking happened. It's just, it's so good. But that, I would argue, is a much more difficult adaptation because, it's based on an RPG. The main character is, is there's a reason why there's a joke of the default vault dweller character in in video game media. Like, how do you make that into a compelling protagonist, or how do you make a version of that into a compelling protagonist? Well, you get her to say okie dokie a lot.
Yeah, you
uh,
literally make her a default personality, and that's the hurdle in the narrative, and
a,
I don't know, it's entertaining
a friend of
learning
mine
to
once
actually have a personality.
a friend of mine once described her to me as somebody who the equivalent in real life of somebody who grew up in a closed Mormon society.
All right, you thought my Joker line was hard to wrap your head around?
It just, in a sense that, like, she was very sheltered. She had a very strict sort of thing. Was kind of brought up to believe that her place was paradise, everywhere else was hell. It kind of turns out that's sort of true, but at the same time, there's more to your shit that's going on that you really realize. And yeah, um,
But the fact that the fact that that description came up, those words were chosen, that association was made.
it's
It really says a lot about your friend's mindset. I'm just saying.
just to go off subject a little bit, he was also kind of dealing with a bit of heartbreak from a girl who was a Mormon. So yeah, that probably had something to do with it. Oh God.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
I,
If he watches
we
this,
went from
Bobby,
just pulling out dictionaries and thesauruses and making random, words click to just straight. I don't even know what to say about that. That's depressing and enticing and just
uh-oh.
all at the same time. I don't know. Like, do I want to hear that story, or is that something I'd rather avoid?
No, what I was just gonna say is just like, if Bobby's listening to this, I'm sorry. That's all I'm gonna say. Uh, um, but no, it just Fallout was just fantastic, and again, it's something that I feel like you know was definitely a far more difficult adaptation than, again, the highly cinematic The Last of Us. Um, I
It was ambitious,
I also,
and
it's like, hmm it's
well, yeah, I was gonna
it's
say is
also what I like. What I really
go
loved
ahead.
about it was that it takes a lot of like the expectations that we had with Fallout, and it subverts the fuck out of them, and I loved it. Um, the whole plot. It's going after your dad, trying to figure out what happened to him, trying to save him. Oh my god, the final episode, Dad's a fucking piece of shit. He's
Hmm.
the worst he's the worst person in this entire show.
Hmm.
It's so good.
So good.
Mhm.
So Fallout. It's like, ah, man, it was so ambitious, but like you said, it goes to show that you can take something, because like you said, The Last of Us, how hard is that to adapt? It's very
Mhm.
straightforward. The plot's very standard. But this proves that you can take an ambitious game where you're like, how the hell do I turn this and still take the pieces and individually make them great and piece them together to make an overarching great show
Mhm.
if you care about it and if you have the
Um,
skill. Because I mean, let's be real, you might care about it and you just suck at your craft.
what I had discovered, two of the main people who were behind that were, like, they were not the creators, but like their studio was like a big driving force behind it. They co-wrote a lot of the episodes and directed some of them. Um, is Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan. Are you familiar with them?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you. Can you hear me?
Okay, give me 1 second. We
Okay,
might
okay.
need to hold on.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not frozen. I'm moving around.
Okay.
Let me
Well.
just fix my camera. There we go.
Oh, there you go again. Okay.
All right, repeat
Uh,
what you said.
so what I was saying is that like one of the main driving forces behind that was Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, who are the people who are behind Westworld. Um, Jonathan Nolan also did The Person of Interest, and he's Christopher Nolan's brother and co-wrote a lot of screenplays with him. So
Mm,
there was some quality behind the show.
mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yeah. First off, I want to say Westworld makes perfect sense. That's literally Westworld, in a different skin.
Mhm.
So that's great. Number two, Person of Interest, in my book, one of the best television series.
It's
Uh,
probably one of the best. It was the last network show that I remember watching regularly. So, and I
yeah,
really did like it a lot.
yeah, same. It's definitely one I constantly recommend.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't think enough people even know about it. And the fact that Christopher Nolan. I mean, come on, dude. It's one of the few movies that actually were successful last year. And
Oppenheimer.
I mean, honestly, yeah, Oppenheimer. And honestly, I can't think of a bigger name. I mean, obviously you can think of bigger names like Spielberg, but I
Hmm.
can't think of a better name that has such a highly regarded catalog than Christopher
Um,
Nolan
in
or
terms of
Quentin
modern,
Tarantino.
yeah, yeah, in terms of like modern like auteur directors, they don't really happen very often. I mean, like even if you were to look at somebody like James Mangold, who of course did what in my opinion is the best superhero movie of all time, Logan.
Hmm.
Um, even his catalog is kind of full of hits and misses. So
Right.
yeah,
Nobody's like, I mean, as great as that movie was and stuff, nobody's like, oh, yeah, it's James Mangold. This movie's
yeah,
going to be fire, you
yeah.
know?
But going back to Jonathan Nolan, like a lot of those early projects of Christopher Nolan were they were co-written by him. A lot of his better movies were co-written by him. So yeah, so of course, Fallout was going to definitely have some really good shit behind it. But
Built
yeah,
for success. That's
yeah,
what I like.
yeah.
Put that money
Um,
into it. Um,
but I was going to say,
Now,
you have one more that you wanted to talk about, but I could.
exactly where I was going with
Okay.
it. And this is not in those regards. I see how you built it up.
Hmm. Okay.
I'm about to bring it a little back down.
You're not going to say Mortal Kombat, are you?
No.
Oh, okay.
Why? What do you think about that movie?
I didn't like it. The new one that came out
I
in like
thought it was okay.
21. I
I didn't
didn't
hate
care
it.
for it.
I thought it
It's
was definitely better than the originals.
I
Um,
mean, I remember I was seeing it with somebody and I remember watching midway through it and it's like, is it just me or is this movie really, really bad? And she just looked at me like and laughed and like, yeah, this is pretty shitty.
yeah, it's
But
not great.
go on. Go.
It's not
Okay, so
great. It
you're
definitely could have had a couple differences
mhm,
that I would have made just by like you said, just by watching it. I just
mhm,
pointed them out. So I don't. I guess that is bad because you're not supposed to be able to point those things out as you're watching it. But whatever. I digress. I'm gonna bring it not that far
okay.
down. Okay.
Mhm.
But have you seen Halo?
You can't see me on camera right now, but I just gave you a side eye. The answer to your question is no. I did not see Halo. I didn't really hear anything good about it. I'm told it's a very poor adaptation. Even on its own merits, it's not very good, and I didn't want to waste my time.
I heard the exact same thing, felt the exact same way, and responded the exact same way. I have not seen it and do not plan to. I will watch it if, like for instance, my wife decides she wants to watch it or
Mhm.
whatever. I'm not gonna like, oh yeah, I can't watch it. But I have no reason to watch it, based on what I heard. So that's unfortunate.
Hmm.
I was just hoping you had seen it and had some thoughts on it.
No, I have a lot of friends who have seen it, um, and you know, they don't have anything good to say about it. Like occasionally it gets entertaining, from what I understand, but just no, they don't have anything good to say about it. It everything I it just seems to indicate it's just going to be one of those like forgotten adaptations. Like in you know, it's I'm trying to think. Like, what's a bad superhero movie that came out between like 2012 and 2019? Just give me one that's not DC related.
Uh, okay. God, it's not DC related. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's not DC related.
Um,
See that's my point though. You can't remember it. That's kind of my point. It's like, you
yeah.
know, it's just one of those things that's just going to be sort of a footnote in history.
Hmm.
And that's its
And,
ultimate destiny.
and I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't care about Halo enough to to make it a point.
That's fair.
Uh,
That's fair.
yeah,
Um,
it's kind of like I'm gonna be honest with you. I had something else right in my head right here.
and you
It's
just
gone.
forgot to. It's
As
just
I
one of
was
the, it's
prepping
one
it.
of those. It was one of those franchises that you don't really care enough about to um get invested in a show that you've already heard is kind of bad to know one way or the other.
Yeah. Oh, have you seen Madam Web?
No, I have no desire to see Madam Web. Um, it's very telling when the lead actress is in all these interviews. Got paid God only knows how much money to do this, and she legit just does not give a shit about any of it, and she makes no effort to hide it.
Yeah. So Google it and read some of these reviews if you ever need some entertainment, because
I
I have never seen a movie that has generated such well thought out and dedicated bombings.
they actually break down exactly what the issue is, don't they?
Yes.
Ah.
The issues and not raging, just so it was so bad that they just had to paint the most perfect and elegant critic uh review that they can do. They had to make sure that you understood
Mhm.
this is such a professional opinion of how shit this movie is. Like they wanted to make sure that you just never ever 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 click this movie ever. Uh
It's pretty
and
bad.
it was like they were compelled to make sure that they saved you from this. And honestly, I've never seen that with any movie ever. Like you brought up earlier, like Rotten Tomatoes, they're about as reliable as fucking IGN because people just they're too harsh with shit. But this, they made sure that you understood that this was not that. Um, and I, after seeing those, because I knew it was bad, I heard a lot, nobody talked good about it. But then it went on streaming, and I was like, we could fuck it, right? Let's just see,
Mhm,
you know. Um,
mhm.
but then I read those, and I was like,
Hold up.
let's not see ever. Let's never do that. I feel like it'll hurt me to watch this movie.
It'll tear out a piece of your soul to experience it.
Yikes, man.
Uh,
Oh boy, have you seen the Penguin?
I'm kind of just waiting for the whole thing to come out before I watch it. I wasn't that big of a fan of the Batman. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great. Kind of like a 7.75 out of 10 for me.
Mm,
Um, so I
it's a
wasn't
fair rating.
necessarily, yeah, I wasn't necessarily dying to go back into that universe. So I'm just gonna kind of wait for now. We'll see what happens.
I've been watching it
You enjoying
religiously.
it?
I like it a lot. Um, but I think it does help that it's not Batman. There's no Batman in
Hmm.
there. It's just Penguin. So it's kind of like you know, like you said, if the Batman movie, you're like, I don't know, for Batman. But if you're just like, okay, take it as like a mob show,
Everything I've heard, it's like basically the Sopranos, but the Penguin, basically.
essentially. I feel like it's a little more eccentric, but
Okay.
because obviously it's the Batman world, so it's got to
Mhm.
be a little more eccentric.
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't tie it directly to the Sopranos, but it's definitely a mob
Okay,
show.
okay, okay.
I I like it. I'm
I,
I'm at the edge of my seat. I'm ready for the next episode every time I finish one. So
I genuinely haven't heard anything bad about it, but so yeah, we'll get there sooner or later. Well, I'll get there sooner or later. You gotta keep in mind though, man, when it comes to so turning back around to the whole superhero fatigue thing. Um, it's just like maybe like video game adaptations are going to slowly start to take over for all this the dominant place that hero movies had. Will probably get make maybe two or three of those a year, maybe. We'll see.